Hello, my sisters. I know I said I was going to share about the second part of boundaries tonight, but I've been writing my memoir and I'm going through a hard time right now. I'm reading about this incident that happened when my husband was driving one night. We got in a fight, and this is how our mouths can get us in trouble. I just want to share this because I know some of you struggle with that like I do. We were having a fight because he wanted to go camping after a football game, and I knew that he had been drinking, but he wouldn't admit it, and I couldn't be content with him not admitting it. But I didn't want to give up going camping because I knew if we didn't, there would just be anger and sitting at home and resentment and anger. So we took off in two different cars, and I took off in the new car, and he took off in the old car with all of our camping stuff. And he ended up, I actually wrote in my journal that I had said to him, I'm going to pray that you have an accident. And so I needed gas, and he left with my stuff in his car, and I didn't have my gas card or my credit card with me. So I called him and I said, meet me at this gas station on the way. And you could either take a back road then to go to the lake, or you could get on I-70 and go that way. And he pulled over and he was trying to be nice, but I was just so angry because I could smell the alcohol. And he was pumping the gas for me. And I said something to the kids. Thaddeus was in my car with his friend. And I said something to them, and Regis thought I was saying something mean to him. And he said, just forget it. And he stopped pumping gas and he walked away mad. And that was the last words that we had said. And then I remember I was driving, and I didn't know if he went speeding away ahead of me. Sorry. He went speeding ahead of me onto the, I didn't know if he got on I-70 or if he got on Old 40. Those are the roads that went to the lake. But I saw a car ahead on both of the roads, so I wasn't sure which one was him. And then I just got lost in thought, and I wrote in my journal, my thoughts were about myself. I was thinking, oh, my promise that Regis would not be drinking forever. Now I get it. He's going to have an accident, and he's going to be a paraplegic, and I'm going to be married to a paraplegic for the rest of my life. And I was pity-potting about that. And then I finally took those thoughts captive. I wrote this in the journal, and I began praying and asking God to forgive me for my mouth. And I was just lost in thought. And then I remember this, and I'm just going to tell this part because I remembered it, even though I wrote it in that book. I remember as I was praying, I saw like spinning lights out of my right-hand side, which the Old 40 was on the right, and I took 70. And it was kind of, I was up on a hill, and Old 40 was down a bit, but I saw spinning lights, and I didn't register at first, but then I said to myself, wait a second, that could be a wreck. And I wasn't even thinking about Regis being in the wreck. I was just thinking that there might have been a wreck, and I wanted to report it. So I got on the phone and I called the police. And I said, I just saw spinning lights. And I kind of looked back, and then the boys were looking back, and we could tell it was a little car. And it was like a giant embankment, and it was facing the embankment, and its lights were out facing the highway. And it was quite a distance, so it's hard to tell. And we're like looking back, trying to see. Anyway, so I said to the boys, we're going to get off. We're going to get off the highway, and we're going to go see who these people are. And I tried calling Regis, and his phone went right to voicemail. And I was like, well, he'll know if I'm not at the lake. Well, then I started getting nervous because I was like, oh my gosh, his phone is going right to voicemail. He could have been in an accident. So then I was kind of getting worried, and I had to wait to drive up to the next exit to go off and then head all the way back down 40 to where that happened. And as I'm doing that, I called my oldest son. He was with his friends, and I said, hey, we got to pray. I said, pray that nothing happened to Dad. I just saw that there was an accident. We were fighting. And I told him that, hey, Dad had an accident. And I sounded like a lunatic. And I even said it in my journal. I'm sure I did. And I wrote later that he had told me, you did sound like a lunatic. And I'm sure I did because I was mad. I was in one of my rages. And then, I was freaked out because I spoke something into existence. And so I pulled off, and I I'm still talking to my son, and there's my car. It was the car I normally drove. Its door was busted off, and it was sitting there facing the opposite way of where we were going, on the wrong side of the street. And I said to my son, oh, it was Dad, I gotta go. And I hung up on him. I'm like a really good mom. He was probably really freaked out. And I couldn't find my husband anywhere. Well, long story short, he ended up, he was in an accident, and the other guy hit him. He was drunk too, but the other guy was life flighted. And they didn't, they said, both of them, they just, because they kind of met down the center of the road. Obviously our car was hit, the guy hit us, and his daughter, or not us, hit my husband, but his daughter was stuck under the car, and her leg was broken, but he was snoring. He was out, and he had to be life flighted. And anyway, that's when the talk of the town like really began. Somebody reported it to my husband's work, and I thought it was going to be his rock bottom. So I posted that, and that was September 9th of 2011. And then the next time I wrote in that journal, because I had journals all over the place, and this was just a nice one where I was going to write significant things. And the next thing I wrote was in February of 2012, so it was a few months later. And I had thought that would be his wake-up call, and then he was drinking again, and just, we had another incident shortly. I mean, even that weekend he drank and drove again, and I didn't know it, but I was with him, and then he had drank and drove, and then somebody had turned in that newspaper article to his work, and then he got scared and started being good. But then by the time I wrote in February, he was drinking again, and I was just beside myself. I was trying so hard to be good, because God was like, you can't tell him what to do. Just love him. Just like he always tells me, just love him. And it was so hard. I just remember it being so hard, and just reading all of it. And then I got to the one part where my son was in what was called the Prairie Classic Wrestling out there, and he was a really good wrestler. He had never been pinned all of his years, and this would have been his junior year. And his dad was there, and his dad was drunk, and he let himself get pinned. And the whole room was quiet, like they knew what was going on. It was so humiliating, and I was crying. I had to walk silently across the room, get my stuff. Like, the whole place was quiet. It was so humiliating. And me and my little one left, and my son, who was a wrestler, he just left. He just stopped. He just didn't do any more wrestling that day, because he got disqualified, because they restarted again, I think, and then he did some kind of cheap move, and they just stopped the thing and let him go, because they knew he was being that way because of his dad. And anyway, so I don't remember all the details of that, except for being so humiliated, and I left. And then my husband had to drive home, and I was just so angry with him. But it got around the schools, and my husband never knew this, because I never told him, and I totally forgot about it till I just read it in that journal. My oldest son's parents were all asking him if he wanted to move in with them, and my little one at school, that week, the teachers told him that they had heard that we have problems at home, and wanted to see if he wanted help. And that was just like the beginning of just, we were so involved in that community. We had done so many things, and now it was just so humiliating. And I'm just reliving all that, and I just remember how horrible it was, because I would see the cycle of defeat that he went through. Like, he had been being good, he wasn't drinking, and then all of a sudden I watched him stop listening to Beth Moore, which we were doing, and then this other thing by Robert Morris, and he started reading his old books. He stopped watching the TV shows of Beth Moore with Wednesdays with Beth and Joyce Meyer. He just started doing all the just his regular sports and stuff, being on his phone or the computer. Sorry, I keep dropping my phone. And I just remember that cycle of defeat, and I just wanted to say to you ladies, I know sometimes when you hear somebody is through it, you don't think that their story was so bad, but when I'm reading this stuff, I'm remembering how terrible it was. Like, we were really doing well in that community. Like, people thought a lot of us. We were the volunteers for everything, and we were pretty well off, and just, it's such a small community that we lived in. We just, like, people were talking about us, like our church even kind of shunned us, really. And then they acted like they didn't. They acted like it was our choice to leave. And God did open a door for us to go to a different church, a little house church that started, that was really a blessing to us. But it just was awful. I just wanted to share that with you, because I just wanted to let you know that I went through a lot. I mean, that was in 2000. That was 2011 and 12, and then he never got well until 2017 was when he took his last drink. He was in Life Changers from 2016 to 2017 for an entire year. For whatever reason, he took up drinking for about a month when he got out, and God told him, he said, if you want this back, he said, I delivered you, but if you want this back, I'll give it to you. And my husband said, no, I don't want it back. And he never drank after that. And then after that, I had a heart attack. I don't know if I ever wrote about that. I had a heart attack in 2017 in October. No, 2018, after he had been out for a year. I had a heart attack, and when I was in the hospital, the enemy tried to get him to stop at the liquor store, and he hadn't drank. He hadn't drank since December of 2017. And when I was in the hospital, he drove home that night, and the enemy was like, you can drink. There's the liquor store. She'd never even know. And he said he just looked over and said, not today, and kept driving, and that was like his final test. So I guess I just say all that to say, my story, even reading it now, it's like, wow, there is only God's grace that carried me, because I don't even know how else I would have made it through that. Like, I don't even, when I was in it, it was bad, and I remember being so frustrated and wanting to yell at him and be mean to him, but God told me just to be kind. But then there were days where I would just get my mind on other stuff and be so involved in the community. But that part was hard, because then the community was no longer our friends. So that was a really hard part. But God is faithful. He does keep his promises, but there's going to be some testing and some fires and some hard times. But he is faithful when we're faithful. And just watch your mouth. I guess that's another lesson. Just watch the things that come out of your mouth, because they can happen. And just stay out of God's way. As I'm reading, I'm just like, honey, you just couldn't behave, could you? You just kept getting in his way. So I hope this is encouraging, because I just, like I said, I want to encourage you not to do the same things I did. I want you to, the boundaries are going to be good, and I am going to share that, because if I had learned that and really did those things, I don't think it would have been drug out as long as it was. But I was not good at keeping boundaries, and I just didn't know how to love him but have boundaries. So that's what we're learning about now. So I'll share more with that tomorrow. Have a blessed day. Peace to you guys. Love ya. Bye-bye.